Have you ever imagined a place so terrifying that even the people who live there prefer to pretend it doesn't exist? There's a river in Ontario where experienced fishermen, men who have spent their entire lives navigating dangerous waters, adamantly refuse to cast their lines after the sun goes down. Another where locals take detours of miles, wasting time and fuel just to avoid crossing it at night. And the most disturbing thing of all, when you ask why, they simply change the subject, look away, or say in an icy tone, "It's better you don't know." Ontario is known for its stunning landscapes, crystal clear lakes, and postcard-perfect forests. But behind this natural beauty lies a dark side that few dare to explore. Rivers that cut through ancient lands where tragedies were buried, along with the truth. Places where the water reflects not only the sky, but memories of a past that refuses to remain silent. Have you ever experienced this? That strange feeling that something isn't right, even when everything seems normal. Today I'm going to take you on a journey through 5 cursed rivers in Ontario, each carrying legends so disturbing they've become closely guarded secrets within the local communities. We're talking about unexplained disappearances, abandoned psychiatric hospitals whose shadows still haunt the banks, voices calling out names in the mist, and waters that changed color after tragedies that official history chose to erase from the records. Some of these places still hold secrets that no one has dared to fully reveal. And be warned, after hearing these stories, you'll never look at a river the same way again. It may seem like just flowing water, rocks, and vegetation, but stay with me until the end and you'll understand why even the skeptics of the region avoid certain stretches when night falls. What you're about to discover may surprise you, may frighten you, and will definitely make you question what really happened in these places, forgotten by time but not by the spirits that still inhabit their waters. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that button now and turn on notifications, because every week I bring you real stories of abandoned, haunted, and forgotten places in Canada. This is our space to share the inexplicable, the disturbing, the fascinating, and believe me, the stories that follow will make you understand exactly why some silences are louder than any scream. And look, I saved the best for last. The last river on this list is so disturbing that paranormal researchers had all their equipment destroyed on the same night while trying to investigate. So stick with me until the end, because this last story will make you question everything you thought you knew about Ontario. So take a deep breath, because our first stop is a river where even the fish seem to avoid certain areas, where the water flows but time seems to have stopped on a specific night in 1927. Let's begin our journey along the river that official maps identify simply as North Current, but which locals whisper by another name when they think no one is listening: the Forgotten Current. This river meanders through a remote area of Ontario, cutting through dense forests where the morning mist never seems to completely dissipate. At first glance it looks like just another tranquil waterway, perfect for an afternoon of canoeing. But there's a reason why you rarely see anyone navigating it, and that reason is buried in a hidden truth dating back to the 1920s. It was during those turbulent years, shortly after the First World War, that a series of unexplained disappearances began to plague the region. Experienced canoeists, people who knew those waters like the back of their hand, simply vanished without a trace. These weren't storms, nor were they ordinary accidents. The canoes were found intact, floating calmly downstream, sometimes with oars still attached, personal belongings arranged as if the occupant had simply evaporated into thin air. The searchers mobilized dozens of volunteers, but the bodies never appeared. It was as if the river had swallowed these people into a different dimension. The impact of these tragedies completely transformed the mindset of the local inhabitants. Entire families abandoned properties along the riverbanks. Fishermen who depended on that water for their livelihood chose to change professions. And then began the stories that no one wanted to believe, but that everyone heard. During the thick fogs that cover the river on autumn mornings, people swore they heard female voices calling specific names. They weren't cries for help, they weren't laments. They were soft, almost melodic calls, as if someone were trying to attract attention in a gentle way. Several residents reported hearing their own names being pronounced with frightening clarity, coming from the middle of the water, where there was absolutely no one. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a historical layer that few people know about that can explain everything. Before that region was colonized by Europeans, there was a thriving indigenous settlement that lived in harmony with those lands for generations. But at the end of the 19th century, during a period of intense rains, a significant part of that settlement was literally swallowed by the waters. Houses, sacred sites, ancestral cemeteries. When the river overflowed devastatingly, families were forcibly relocated to other areas. Their dead remained underwater, and according to the traditional beliefs of those people, the spirits never found peace. The elders of the nearby indigenous communities speak in whispers of a curse that was pronounced that day, not as revenge, but as a declaration that those waters would never again be safe, that the boundary between the world of the living and the dead had become porous in that specific place. And when you look at the pattern of disappearances in the 1920s, a disturbing revelation emerges. They all happened in specific stretches of the river, exactly where ancient indigenous settlement structures lie on the muddy bottom. What makes all this even more unsettling are the inexplicable decisions of the local authorities. If you visit the region today, you'll find warning signs scattered along certain stretches of the river. Official signs installed by the provincial government. But do you know what's written on them? Just restricted area and navigation not recommended. No explanation about dangerous currents. No mention of wildlife. No technical warning justifying the restriction. It's as if the authorities know something is wrong there, but refuse to put in writing what the real problem is. But the strangest thing, the detail that makes me shudder every time I think about it, is that nobody in the neighboring town is willing to talk about what happened in the summer of 1927. That specific year is treated as a black hole in local history. Police records from that period are lost. Newspaper editions from that time simply don't exist in public archives. And when you ask the descendants of the oldest families in the region, the answer is always the same. An uncomfortable silence followed by an abrupt change of subject. Something happened that summer, something so disturbing that 3 generations later, people still carry the weight of that secret like a cursed inheritance. If you feel there's a greater truth behind these stories, comment below. I believe, because we need to remember that not every mystery needs to be solved to be respected, but every imposed silence deserves to be questioned. And speaking of questioning, there is another river in Ontario whose official name is rarely pronounced by locals. They prefer to call it simply Whispering Waters, and believe me, it's not because of the gentle sound of its current. This river cuts through a region that was once prosperous in the early 20th century, but which today seems to carry an invisible weight in the air. And the reason for this is partially hidden among the dense vegetation that covers its banks, the ruins of one of the most controversial psychiatric hospitals in Ontario's history. Riverside Psychiatric Hospital was built in 1903 with the promise of being revolutionary in the treatment of mental illness. Strategically located on the banks of this river, the idea was that the proximity to nature and the calming sound of the water would aid in the patient's recovery. But the behind-the-scenes story of that institution tells a completely different tale. For decades, that place functioned as a repository for people that society wanted to forget, and the river, the one that should have brought peace, became a silent witness to horrors that should never have happened. The historical records that still survive reveal practices that today we would consider torture disguised as medical treatment. Shock therapies applied with brutal frequency, mass lobotomies performed, prolonged isolation in tiny cells. But there is an even more disturbing detail that few know. Several of the so-called experimental treatments were conducted literally on the banks of the river. There is fragmented documentation mentioning therapeutic immersion sessions, where patients were subjected to procedures in ice-cold water as a form of mental rebalancing. And then, over the years, the disappearances began. Patients would disappear from official records overnight. Families who came to visit were told that their loved ones had been transferred to another institution, but they never found out which one. Others were declared to have escaped during the night, even though they were people in a catatonic state who could barely walk. The hidden truth behind these disappearances was never fully revealed. But the residents of the region have their own theories, and they all involve that river that flows indifferently alongside the ruins. The hospital was officially closed in 1976 after a series of scandals that finally reached the press. The facilities were abandoned, and nature began its work of reclaiming that space. Today, if you dare to walk there, you will find brick structures covered in ivy, broken windows that look like empty eyes watching the river, corridors where vegetation grows through cracks in the floor. It's a scene that seems straight out of a horror movie. But the reality of that place is much darker than any fiction, because even after nearly 50 years of abandonment, Whispering Waters has not found peace. Residents of the nearest town report phenomena that defy any rational explanation, especially on full moon nights, when the water reflects a ghostly, silvery light. People living miles away swear they hear sounds coming from the direction of the river. They are not just whispers, as the name suggests. They are high-pitched screams that cut through the night, followed by hysterical laughter that echoes among the trees. Some describe it as if an invisible crowd were screaming and laughing at the same time, creating a deafening symphony of suffering and insanity. This impact on the local community completely transformed people's relationship with that area. Trails that used to be popular for hiking were abandoned. Fishermen who spent decades exploring that river simply stopped. And those who needed to pass nearby at night developed an almost collective mentality of denial, preferring to quicken their pace and pretend they heard nothing, felt nothing, saw nothing. But perhaps the most disturbing account comes from the security guards who were hired in the 1980s to patrol the ruins and prevent teenagers from entering the site. The turnover was absurd. Guards lasted at most a few weeks before resigning. One of them, whose name was never publicly released, worked there for only 3 nights. On the 3rd night, he was carrying a portable audio recorder and decided to record the strange sounds he had been hearing. According to witnesses who spoke to him the next day, the man was visibly shaken, pale, and trembling. He vowed never to return to that place and handed the recording over to local authorities as evidence that something deeply wrong was happening there. And here's the part that really unsettles me. That recording was officially declared lost just days later. No copies were filed. No record of the content was kept, and when journalists tried to investigate the case, they were told there was no documentation of any incident involving security guards on that property. Because when institutions try to bury the past, it's usually because the past is full of decisions that nobody wants to take responsibility for. And speaking of questionable decisions, the 3rd river on our journey has a name that sounds almost poetic, the Silent Flow. But make no mistake, this name carries no beauty. It literally describes a disturbing anomaly that no one can explain. There are specific stretches of this river where the water simply makes no sound. It's not that the noise is low or soft, it's a total absence. The water flows, you see the movement, but it's as if someone had pressed the mute button on reality. And the strangest thing, not even animals approach these areas. No birds perch on the nearby trees, no squirrels cross the banks, nor do insects fly across the surface. It's as if nature itself decided that this place should be avoided. But the unnatural silence of the water is only the surface of the mystery. The true darkness of this place began to reveal itself in the 1950s. When children from the region began to report something that their parents initially dismissed as childish imagination. They spoke of a wet man who stood on the banks of the river, silently observing. The descriptions were too consistent to be coincidence. A tall man, completely soaked, with clothes that seemed from another era, always motionless, always watching. The children said he never spoke, never moved, only stared with an intensity that made them run home. The adults in the community laughed at these stories until the summer of 1954. That's when something happened that completely transformed the town's mindset and left scars that persist to this day. A group of 7 children, all between 8 and 12 years old, went out to play on the banks of the Silent Flow on a sunny July afternoon. They were known to everyone in the small town, children of local farmers and merchants, children who grew up playing in that river and knew every stone, every bend. But on that particular afternoon, something went terribly wrong. As the sun began to set and the children hadn't returned home, the entire city mobilized. Search teams with flashlights scoured the riverbanks throughout the night, and at dawn they made the devastating discovery. The 7 bodies were found in one of the river's quiet stretches, all in shallow water, none more than a meter from the bank. The depth there barely reached a child's waist. There was no strong current, no obvious dangers. It was simply impossible for 7 experienced children to drown simultaneously in such safe conditions. The repercussions of that tragedy reverberated for decades. Families moved away from the city, unable to bear the pain and confusion. The river, once a meeting point for the community, became a place people avoided even looking at. But behind the public mourning, there were disturbing revelations that the official investigation never managed to adequately explain. and there's one detail that the police documented but never widely released. All the victims had the same expression of absolute terror frozen on their faces. It wasn't the expression of someone struggling against the water. It wasn't despair from drowning. It was pure terror, as if they had seen something so terrifying in their last moments of life that their minds simply collapsed. The investigators also noticed something else, something that made absolutely no sense. The children's clothes were completely soaked, as expected, but their hair and upper bodies showed a strange pattern of moisture, as if they had been held underwater by something or someone. There were no signs of struggle, no scratches or defensive bruises, but the position of the bodies suggested that they hadn't simply slipped and drowned. They appeared to have been deliberately held below the surface. Decades later, the residents built a small memorial on that stretch of the river. It's a simple structure, made of stacked stones and a few flowers that are regularly replenished by anonymous hands. But here is the detail that leaves me with more questions than answers. When you ask the residents who the memorial is for, they refuse to answer. It's not that they don't know, it's that they consciously choose not to say. Some look away, others change the subject abruptly. The older ones, who lived through that time, simply shake their heads silently, with an expression that mixes sadness and fear. There is an unofficial theory that circulates quietly among the descendants of those families. They believe that the memorial is not only for the 7 children who died in 1954, it is also for the wet man that the children saw, and who may have existed long before that tragic summer. According to this theory, that memorial is a way of appeasing something that should never have been disturbed, in an attempt to maintain peace with a presence that inhabits the silent waters and only manifests itself when it decides it is time to take someone else. But those who know the past, those who bear the weight of previous generations' decisions to build homes and raise families near that cursed river, they know better. If you believe that some places hold memories so intense that they become almost tangible, comment below. I feel it. We now arrive at the river that perhaps bears the most fitting name of all, Blackwater Creek, and this name is not metaphorical. The water in this river has a dark, almost opaque color that doesn't correspond to any obvious geological or environmental explanation for the region. Hydrology experts have analyzed samples, trying to understand the composition that causes this somber hue, but the results always come back inconclusive. The water is technically clean, without significant pollution, but it retains that disturbing color that seems to absorb light instead of reflecting it. But it wasn't always like this. Photographic records and accounts from long-time residents confirm that before 1935, Blackwater Creek had crystal clear waters, typical of Ontario rivers. The transformation happened during a specific night of that year, a night that forever changed the history of that region and left scars that go far beyond the color of the water. It was the night that the Grandview Hotel, one of the most luxurious establishments in the province, was consumed by a devastating fire that killed 47 people. The Grandview was synonymous with elegance and sophistication. Built in 1898 on the banks of what was still a clear river, the hotel attracted the elite of Toronto and Montreal. Politicians, businessmen, artists all spent time there to escape the frenetic pace of big cities. The architecture was impressive, with 4 floors, spacious balconies overlooking the river, and halls decorated with chandeliers imported from Europe. It was the kind of place where the decisions that shaped the province were made in discreet conversations, in cigar lounges and at formal dinners. On the night of March 13, 1935, the hotel was at full capacity. It was a long weekend, and entire families had booked rooms to celebrate the beginning of spring. Around 3 in the morning, a fire started on the first floor. The official version never determined the exact cause, only speculating about an electrical problem or a poorly extinguished cigarette. But what happened next was a tragedy of catastrophic proportions. The fire spread with unnatural speed, as if the hotel walls themselves were eager to burn. The main stairwells were blocked within minutes. Desperate guests tried to escape through the windows, but the height made it fatal. Some ran towards the river, thinking they could save themselves in the water. but the heat was so intense that even the air near the river was scorching. Of the 123 guests registered that night, only 76 survived. 47 people died, burned, suffocated by smoke, or killed in a desperate attempt to escape. And here is the detail that no one can rationally explain. It was the morning after that fire that residents noticed that the river water had changed color. The mentality of the survivors and the families of the victims never fully recovered. Many developed deep trauma, not only from the fire itself, but from something they reported seeing that night. Witnesses who escaped spoke of shadows moving against the direction of the flames, of screams that did not match the voices of known guests, of an oppressive feeling that something beyond the fire was present in that hotel. Nurses who cared for survivors in the following days documented that many woke up screaming not about the fire, but about dark figures that prevented them from leaving. Decades later, fishermen who dared to cast their lines in Blackwater Creek report discoveries that defy all logic. They find old personal objects trapped among the rocks of the riverbed, rusty pocket watches, women's jewelry, glasses with wire frames. But the detail that sends shivers down the spine is that all the watches, without exception, are stopped at exactly the same time, 3:17 in the morning. Some fishermen speculate that these objects belonged to guests who tried to escape towards the river. Others believe they are manifestations of something darker, objects that appear and disappear as physical reminders of a tragedy that refuses to be forgotten. Professional and amateur photographers visiting the area have discovered a disturbing visual anomaly. When capturing images of the river, especially during twilight or on cloudy days, their cameras record something invisible to the naked eye. Mists with vaguely human shapes appear in the photographs, hovering above the surface of the dark water or near the ruins of what remains of the Hotel's foundation. Some dismiss this as effects of light and humidity, but the consistency of the shapes and the frequency with which they appear make even skeptics hesitate. And most frightening of all, the detail that transforms this mystery into something truly inexplicable. The Grandview Hotel was never rebuilt. The ruins were partially demolished in 1937, and the site was abandoned. Today, only fragments of the stone foundation remain visible among the vegetation. But residents of the area, especially those who live overlooking the former hotel site, report seeing lights on moonless nights. They are not lantern or car lights. They are flickering, yellowish lights that appear suspended in the air exactly where the windows of the second and third floor rooms of the hotel, which no longer exists almost 90 years ago, would have been when confronted with these reports. Local authorities prefer not to comment. There are no official investigations, no scientific studies on the anomalies. It's as if there's a collective decision to simply leave Blackwater Creek and its secrets in peace, hoping that time will eventually erase the memories of what happened there. But the river remains dark, the clocks continue to appear stopped at 3:17, and the lights continue to shine in windows that should be nothing but empty air. If you feel that some tragedies leave permanent marks on the places where they happened, write this down. Places have memory, because perhaps the dark water of Blackwater Creek is not just a physical phenomenon, but a visible manifestation of a pain so profound that it has literally transformed the surrounding nature. And this transformation leads us to our last river. Finally, we arrive at the river that carries the deepest historical weight of all, a place where the past is not just a distant memory, but an almost palpable presence that demands respect. The Morning River meanders through a region of Ontario that was the site of one of the bloodiest and most forgotten battles between European settlers and Indigenous peoples in the 18th century. This is not just another river with a dark history. It is a liquid memorial to systemic violence that official Canadian history often downplays or simply omits from textbooks. During the 1750s and 1760s, that region was fiercely contested territory. The Indigenous peoples who had lived there for generations faced the increasingly aggressive invasion of settlers who saw those fertile lands as theirs by divine right. What many do want to know is that several decisive battles took place precisely on the banks of that river. Battles that were not adequately documented, that did not receive official names, that simply disappeared from historical records as if they had never happened. But the land remembers, the water remembers, and the people who respect that place know that some wounds are too deep to heal completely. The elders of modern Indigenous communities who maintain a spiritual connection to that region speak of the Morning River with a reverence tinged with sorrow. They teach the younger generations that those waters carry the tears of their ancestors, the blood of warriors who fought to protect their families, the laments of mothers who lost children, It is not superstition or romantic folklore. It is living history, passed down orally through generations, preserving truths that colonial documents deliberately erased. And this story manifests itself in ways that defy conventional explanations. Residents of the region, including many who have no indigenous ancestry and were initially skeptical, report consistent auditory phenomena on stormy nights. When the wind howls through the trees and the rain lashes the river's surface, you can hear sounds that don't belong to the present. War drums with specific rhythms echo through the darkness. Human laments, voices singing in languages that most no longer recognize, screams muffled by distance and time. Some describe it as if an entire battle is being replayed in some parallel dimension, with the sounds occasionally crossing over into our plane of existence. But perhaps the most disturbing physical manifestation is the phenomenon that occurs several times a year, without any predictability. The river water, normally clear with a slightly greenish hue typical of the region, occasionally turns reddish. It's not an orange-red from sediments or algae. It's a deep red, viscous in appearance, that spreads through specific stretches of the river as if blood were being poured from some invisible source. Geologists and environmentalists have been called in multiple times to investigate. Samples have been collected and analyzed, and here's the detail that no one can rationally explain. Chemically, the water remains just water. There are no pigments, no contaminants, nothing in its composition that justifies that coloration that everyone can clearly see. The impact of these phenomena has created an interesting division in the local community. There is one group, generally people who have recently moved to the region, who insist on scientific explanations and see it all as coincidence or mass hysteria. But there is another group, especially those whose families have lived there for generations, who have developed a mindset of deep respect for that place. They know that some areas simply should not be disturbed, that some silences should not be broken, that some dead require perpetual peace. Modern indigenous communities who maintain spiritual ties to that land have made a clear and direct request: leave the Morning River in peace. Do not picnic on its banks. Do not organize sport fishing expeditions. Do not treat it as a tourist attraction or a mystery to be solved. This request is not merely a cultural preference. It is a genuine warning based on understandings that transcend Western rationality. And to reinforce this warning, signs have been installed at strategic points along the river, written in native indigenous languages, with translations in English and French that simply say, "Do not disturb those who rest here." But of course, there are always those who ignore warnings, who see restrictions as challenges. Professional paranormal researchers, equipped with state-of-the-art cameras, sensitive audio recorders, and electromagnetic field meters, have tried multiple times to document the phenomena of the Morning River. And here's something that genuinely unsettles me. On a specific night in October 2019, 3 different teams of paranormal investigators, who didn't even know of each other's existence, visited distinct stretches of the river. And on the same night, all 3 groups had their equipment completely destroyed. It wasn't a gradual technical failure. It was sudden and complete destruction. Cameras that stopped working simultaneously, recorders whose internal circuits literally melted, new batteries that drained instantly. And all 3 groups reported the same oppressive feeling moments before. An angry presence that didn't want to be documented, that didn't want to be turned into entertainment. If you understand that some places demand reverence instead of morbid curiosity, comment below. Respect above all, because the Morning River is not a horror theme park. It's a sacred cemetery stretching for miles, where generations of people who fought for their very existence deserve to rest undisturbed by those who see tragedy as an opportunity for content. And this reflection brings us to an important conclusion about everything we've explored today. 5 rivers. 5 stories people prefer to forget. But some memories, some presences, simply refuse to disappear. What we discover today goes far beyond urban legends or stories to scare tourists. We're talking about real places, where real tragedies happened, where real people lost their lives in circumstances that were never fully clarified. Ontario holds far darker secrets than we imagine, and perhaps, just perhaps, there's a good reason why the locals don't want to talk about it. This journey through Ontario's cursed rivers made me reflect on how many stories remain buried simply because they are too inconvenient, too disturbing, or demand a kind of responsibility that subsequent generations prefer not to assume. Each of these rivers represents not only a paranormal mystery, but also a collective failure to preserve historical truth, to honor, those who suffered to recognize that the past doesn't disappear just because we choose not to look at it. And tell me, would you have the courage to visit any of these rivers? Or are you on the team that prefers not to risk it? If you know of other haunted places in Ontario, or anywhere in Canada, that people avoid mentioning, leave them in the comments. Let's investigate together. This channel exists precisely for that reason, to bring to light the stories that have been erased, the places that have been forgotten, the truths that someone decided should not be told. If you've stayed with me this far, until the end of this exploration through dark waters and disturbing memories, write in the comments, "I went all the way." I want to know how many of you truly connected with these stories, how many understand that there is value in preserving even the darkest narratives of our past. And if this content made sense to you, if it touched something that goes beyond simple curiosity, leave a like. This shows me that it's worth continuing to delve into these mysteries, that there's a community here that values the truth, however uncomfortable it may be. And look, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, now's the time. Next week, we're going to discover several untold stories from the north. So hit the subscribe button and activate the bell, because you won't find this kind of content anywhere else. Together we're building an archive of forbidden memories, of places that deserve to be remembered, even when everyone prefers to pretend they don't exist. There's a video over here about ghost towns in Ontario. Click on it and continue watching, because this journey through Canada's forgotten places is just beginning. And remember one thing, not all silence means peace. Sometimes it's just fear, sometimes it's guilt, and sometimes it's simply the cowardly choice not to face what really happened. But we, here on this channel, are not going to make that choice. We will continue searching, questioning, and bringing these stories back to the surface, no matter how deep they have been buried. Until the next mystery, and be careful out there. You never know when you'll stumble upon one of those places that prefers to be left alone.